Oregon's been making big moves in the transfer portal. They have the second highest rated transfer portal class according to 24/7 Sports. Does that make them the Big Ten favorites? Let's bring on Craig Shemon, Locked On Big Ten, joining me here on the show. And Craig, obviously, I'm an Oregon guy. Look, I feel great about where the Ducks are at. It's hard to not, but how does it land for you, them landing Derrick Harmon and Peyton Woodyard in the transfer portal this weekend?
It's been great. It's like the rich are starting to get richer. I've been excited, and I've talked about this a lot on Lockdown Big Ten over the past couple of months. I think it's a 2-horse race coming off Kentucky Derby weekend. I don't know if it's a photo finish or not, but I think it's between Ohio State and Oregon. And Michigan fans get upset at me, and I'm like, guys, you lost like 18 players to the draft. Let's see where you're at. I think, and of course, the great thing is that Ohio State and Oregon play each other earlier in the season, and I've gone so far as to say it's a rather bold statement. Some people laugh at me. I don't think Ohio State's most important game on its schedule is Michigan this year. It's the Oregon game at Autzen Stadium. And
I think you can make. I think you can make that case because Vegas at least thinks that Oregon's got a better chance to win the Big Ten than Michigan does, and the Wolverines could surprise people. But the thing with Michigan, Craig, is they don't necessarily know who their quarterback is.
Absolutely necessarily don't know that. It's a big problem. So, yeah, I think it would be great. I know Dan Lanning caught a lot of people's attention earlier. This is going back to the end of last year. Hey, how are you going to have to adjust to the Big Ten and how they play? And he just boldly said, no, they're going to have to adjust to us. I always remind people because last year, we like in the Big Ten, we like to claim our defensive prowess. And of course, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State were 1, 2, 3 in the country in scoring defense last year. I am quick to remind people, even though they think the Pac-12 doesn't play defense, that Oregon was a top 10 team defensively, and they have offensive firepower. They will be formidable in the Big Ten this year. I think they have just as good of a chance of winning it, and it's a 2-man race, Ohio State and Oregon. I absolutely believe that as we're sitting here in the beginning of May, looking at counting down the days to the season.
Yeah, and there are still transfer portal moves that will get made that will make certain teams better, but Oregon just got better. They plugged a need here. That second interior defensive lineman starting spot was a hole going into the spring transfer portal window, and it could have been filled by former 4-star recruits or redshirt freshmen or true freshmen that were ready to make that leap. But I think you get a sure thing there and allow those young guys to be depth pieces rather than starting pieces. I think that's a really big thing for Oregon's defense this year. And I think that the Big Ten has got a lot of teams at the top. I think there's a drop-off in there. I still think USC is undervalued. I don't think they should be as far behind the conference title odds as they are compared to Michigan and Penn State. But that October 12th game at Autzen Stadium, Craig, is going to be one of the biggest games in all of college football this year. And depending on how things shake out, that game could decide who goes to the Big Ten championship game to try and get one of those top 4 seeds and the automatic playoff berth that leads to that and whatnot. But I just think that Oregon is in win now, attack now. They're not waiting around. There's no adjustment period here. This is an all-in feel.
It'd be a great story for them in their first year in the Big Ten to win it. And come on, I mean, what a proud moment that would be, and what a proud moment that would be from leftover Pac-12 fans. One of our schools went over there and did it. I saw, I was just reading about an hour ago that the athletic director for Oregon was looking at there are 15 different Ohio area codes in his ticket base. They're gobbling up the tickets. I think most of the games are just about sold out for Oregon anyway, but that there's such high demand for that Ohio State. And Ohio State's going to travel some people. I know Oregon wants to keep that crowd green, but I can't wait. I have it circled. I know it's going to be a big week on Locked On Big Ten. We're going to be all over. We're going to treat it like the conference championship right in the middle of the season. It's going to be great.
I do think the possibility of, what Oregon and Washington did last year is entirely possible, where they meet once in the regular season, it's an instant classic, and then they meet again in the conference championship game. And you mentioned Oregon's defense earlier. It was very good last year. The only team, there was one team, just the one team that Oregon couldn't stop, And that's a team that had a top 10 quarterback, a top 10 receiver, and a couple other, I think, a third round NFL wide receiver on it. That's the one team that Oregon couldn't stop last year. Now you're looking at a defense that has improved from a season ago. And I don't see that caliber of offense in the Big Ten anywhere, Craig. I think this could come down to, whether Oregon wins 10, 11, or 12 games. I think they're capable of all three. If things go wrong, I think they could win 9. But I think they're at least a 10-win team. And to push them closer to 10 than 12, I think it's going to come down to how those Big Ten defenses can stop Oregon's offense with Dylan Gabriel, the Oklahoma transfer.
I tend to agree with you. I think they're ready to go, and you keep improving the defense. And you alluded to Derrick Harmon earlier. I was surprised to see him go. I mean, Michigan State thought they were solid at defensive line. They've lost 2 guys here this spring, Harmon being one of them. But you talk about the other teams in the Big Ten, and I don't think there's a clear-cut offense. Like, I think every team almost has question marks at quarterback, except a couple of the Pac-12 teams coming over. And I'm talking about teams with incumbents like Drew Aller. I don't know what's going on at Penn State with him. He clearly regressed.
Well, I like what Penn State has done this offseason. I like their offensive coordinator hire, Julian Fleming from Ohio State. I think that helps. Another year in the system. James Franklin is still there. I think Aller has got a pretty high floor. The question is, can you hit his ceiling? Because if you can hit his ceiling, well, Penn State's they lose Manny Diaz, but they've had a strong defensive culture the last couple of years. James Franklin is a really good coach. I think the Big Ten is as open for them as it has been in the last couple of years, because you don't have a national championship caliber Michigan, or you don't have a dominant Ohio State the way other teams have been, because they have quarterback questions.
And the thing about Penn State, they go 10-2 every year, and their 2 losses are always Ohio State and Michigan. They don't have to play Michigan this year. And this is probably the year maybe they would want to play them. But and
on Penn State's schedule, they get Washington instead of Oregon. That is a major break. Now they have to go to USC, and I think that's going to be a difficult game. But amongst the Pacific Northwest schools, you would much rather play Washington than Oregon this year if you're Penn State. That's a break for the Nittany Lions.
No doubt about it. And, there are people getting a little anxious over there in Happy Valley. They want something to happen. They want the next level. But, I tell them, you go 10-2 again, like you have every year, and you always fall up short in the Big Ten. It's not going to matter now. You go 10-2 in the Big Ten, you're going to that 12-team playoff.
Yep.
There's going to be a postseason. We're going to have to get used to that. And you talk about how Oregon played Washington last year, and they turned around and played them in the championship game. There's going to be teams. Maybe it'll happen the first year. There's going to be a three-peat. There's going to be a series. It's like baseball now, best of 3. Just win the last one, and it's going to happen. It absolutely is going to happen.
Yeah, I could see it. It's tough. Like it's definitely not impossible that Ohio State, Oregon play 3 times. I think 1 or 2. I mean, obviously they're going to play 1. I think 2 is a lot more likely than 3, just because there's so many variables in that particular equation. But they're also 2 of the top 5 national championship favorites this year. And I'll get you out of here on this, Craig. If I asked you today, after the Peyton Woodyard move could be impactful, getting the safety from Alabama, he hasn't actually played a snap of college football yet. Derrick Harmon is the big addition for Oregon. With him there and Oregon more set at quarterback than Ohio State, would you favor the Ducks over the Buckeyes right now in a neutral field?
It all comes down to quarterback, because I do think Ohio State, I think they're a little deeper because they kept a lot of kids from going to the NFL. They really ramped up their nil situation to keep a couple borderline kids in. So they're deep. I'm not a fan of Will Howard. He's a 59% passer. I keep telling everybody this. So I don't know who's going to win that job. I mean, they got 5 quarterbacks to choose from.
And none of them transferred.
Well, yeah. I mean, Will Howard comes in. The other 4 were there.
No, I know. And they're all 5 going to be there in the fall, it appears.
I thought one of them would leave, and I thought eventually one of these 2 freshmen will leave. But, Oregon's stable at that position. So that's where they would have the advantage. Plus, they get to play at their place at Autzen Stadium, which will give them the edge in that game. And if you beat them head-to-head, it's not crazy to say that Oregon can be the favorite right now in the Big Ten as we sit here in May.
Craig Shemon, Locked On Big Ten. Check him out over there on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Craig, thanks as always.
You bet.
Speaking of Washington, Are they going to be better than people expect them to? Well, let's check in on Seattle coming up next.